Welcome back to season 2 of Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. I am your host, Marcia Blaine, a licensed professional counselor, a clinical hypnotherapist, an author, motivator, and life coach. Join us during the season as we begin to normalize freedom. Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. Welcome back to Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. And I had the privilege of interviewing the person that made me push go on doing this podcast a year and a half ago. She was like, "What are you waiting for? Just hit go." And I was like, "Well, send me all the stuff." And I was already signed up in all these apps, paying for them unnecessarily and not using them. So thank you, Sandtrice, for giving me that push to go.
You're
Sandtrice
welcome.
is the owner of Unique Destiny Counseling Services. She caters to a population of traumatized individuals as they work through the process of anxiety, depression, sometimes becoming angry, issues, being able to become the person that they desire to be as they break through a lot of trauma bonds. She is the podcast host of Self Aware and Fucked Up. I so love the title of that because the thing is sometimes we walk into this life thinking we have to be perfect. Even as counselors, people think that we don't go through things and we go through a lot of crap just in our personal life. It may look like we handling it well, but we see therapists too, y'all. Just let me put that out there. We see therapists too. So that's what our reality is, okay? She is married. She has a beautiful little puppy. I can't remember the dog's name, but she
Right.
be all over the place. If you haven't, please go follow her at Tree the LPC on all social media platforms. Please follow and subscribe to her podcast. You can find it on any streaming app. Run over to that store, get you some cool wear, some t-shirts. Are you still doing those?
Yeah, they still out there.
Okay. And so I introduced to you all Sandtrice Russell, a licensed professional counselor, as well as a clinical supervisor. So she's helping teaching counselors how to counsel better, helping them getting prepared. You've been in the field for a little time. So welcome. Thank you for saying yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It is truly a pleasure to finally make it on. And I definitely appreciate the invite and all of your kind words. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Today, we're going to talk about cultural competence.
Mm,
Last year, I had the privilege to sit in a presentation that you gave on cultural competence. And I know that
mm.
right now we are living in an environment that is so racially motivated, that is so absence of competence culturally.
Mm.
When you gave that presentation, you could see people feeling uncomfortable,
Yes.
because it was true, it was raw. And what I wanted you to come on to do was really talking about how we can work towards cultural competence in a world where racial aggression continues. Like we're still not being identified as people.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? How can we help people?
Yeah, I think it really starts with having to check our own bias. And, this is not just for counselors who are not BIPOC. This is also for all counselors because we also, as African American clinicians, make a lot of assumptions about the African American experience because everybody's experience is different. So just being able to take that step back and examine your own bias and really say, okay, well, what are my issues? What do I have going on that maybe is filtering my lens a little bit differently and really being able to check that part of ourselves, especially when we're with the client. I think it's also really, really important to open it up and allow the client to tell you what's going on, tell you what are those things from their history that have
Mm-hmm.
shaped them and made their lives and their
Mm-hmm.
responses to some of the trauma that we all experience what it has been. Because a lot of times I think that from the Caucasian or non-BIPOC perspective, we have therapists who just lack awareness of the African American experience. And then from the BIPOC side of it, we lack clinicians that fully understand, or at least sometimes they think they know it all and they're not in a position
Mhm.
to learn, because there's so many different aspects to being BIPOC, and there's so many different, ways, shapes, and forms that we come in. So really getting to focus on the client and their worldview, and let them tell you what bothers them, what are the microaggressions, what are the things
Mhm.
that they deal with, and then start there.
Exactly. That's a great point, Sandtrice, because there's an assumption that we're all Black. So we
Mm,
all have the same experiences, and we don't,
right.
right? A person that grew up, like for me, I was raised in a single parent household with mom that worked 2 to 3 jobs to try to make it. That may not be the same experience for someone that was raised in a single parent household where mom was avoidant
Mm,
or neglectful. We can't make an assumption,
right.
and we're never too old to learn new stuff. What would
Yeah.
you say to even individuals who often feel like it's not my job to educate others about my Blackness? It's not
Mm.
my job to educate others about being BIPOC. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like if we one, yeah, it's not your job. However, if we want to change the narrative, if you want to change our experience and help people know a little bit more about how to deal with us, because I truly believe that it is our responsibility to teach people how to treat us. We have historically been treated as the last. And
Mm-hmm.
we know from we ain't gonna get too deep into the other stuff, but we are the first, we are the chosen people, but we have been treated poorly over years historically,
Mm-hmm.
systemic racism, all of that. So if you've been taught, and people have been taught to hate you for no reason other than the fact that you have a little bit extra melanin in your system, we do owe it to ourselves to teach people about our culture in a positive way, and not just the
Mm-hmm.
narrative that's given on TV. No one can fully understand who I am unless they sit down and have a conversation with me, nor will they fully know what my expectations are in terms of how I want to be treated. So I think it's important to kind of take that pride away and really just be
Mm-hmm.
open to sharing it. Unless someone gives you a reason to think that they on some foolishness with why they're inquiring, just be open and share your story, because I think people are more moved by your story, whether it's your sadness, your happiness, whatever. They're more moved by knowing you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't get to know that core part of you, it's easy for them to see you as just another Black person.
Exactly. One of the things, and we work for the Veterans Crisis Line, and often I hear things like, well, you're my trigger, you're Black. It's like, well, what
Mm,
exactly do you know about my Blackness? What
nothing.
do you understand, right,
Right.
about my Blackness? And it usually stumps them because there are a lot of assumptions out
Hmm.
there that are assuming that all Blacks operate the same way, we do the same thing, and the whole 9 yards. And that's not the truth, right?
Right.
Our truth is we have to get to the root of what your hatred is.
Mm,
Usually, and this is my thought, usually the hatred stems from lack of knowledge,
yeah.
fear, and false power. What are
Mm.
your thoughts about that?
Lack of knowledge, fear, and false power.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think ignorance definitely, leads a lot of racism. And I think a lot of it is definitely taught. People lack the ability to acknowledge that privilege is even a thing. I
Mm.
remember giving a workshop over the summer and having someone come in just really to kind of heckle me in the bigger picture workshop, because they didn't believe that privilege was a thing, or that it was a thing that we should be concerned about. And so
Mhm.
just I think that a lot of those things drive people because they don't
Mm.
really want to look at self. Don't really want to look at the bigger picture, so to speak,
Right.
and really look at the fact that we're all the same. The only thing
Mhm.
that makes us different
Is our
is
melanin.
our melanin, our background, our stories, our history. And
Mhm.
our history just tends to be very rich and very deep. A lot of our history was robbed from us,
Yeah.
because we were brought to a place where it's like, okay, now you're slaves. Now you have to do this. And so
Mhm.
we lost our identity. And so I
Right.
think that that false sense of power from them comes from what they're taught.
Mhm.
Racism is taught.
It
All of
is.
those things are passed down generationally, just like our trauma bonds and our
Mhm.
generational trauma is passed down. Racism is passed down. People
Yeah.
they learn it from their parents, they learn it from their grandparents. And so that false sense of power, all of that is taught. No one is
Yeah.
born thinking I'm all powerful. You see two kids playing that are of different ethnicities or races, unless that other kid has been taught like, hey, you're less than me, they see each other the same. So I think
Exactly.
it's all in the education, it's all in how they're raised.
I remember being in my doctoral program and a professor said to me, "We're just alike."
Mm,
And I said, "Really?" Things that she said was she grew up poor. And she assumed because I was African American raised in a single
mm.
parent household that I grew up poor.
Wow.
She also said, "I remember having to go to the store with food stamps
Mm,
to get food because we were so poor." And I said, "Wow." She said, "What?" I said, "I never had that experience."
mm.
She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "The only thing that we are like in is a female body. You're making a
Wow.
lot of assumption
Mm,
because you grew up white and poor and you assumed that I was black and poor." And
wow.
she was so offended at my response. And I said to her, I said, "I'm often amazed at you being able to teach on cultural competence.
Mm,
And you just clearly showed that you're lacking it." And she said,
exactly.
"I probably need to be back in the school." I was like, "You probably do," right? Because oftentimes people assume
Yeah.
that they understand someone else's plight in life because of the rhetoric. And like you said, that privilege makes them feel like I've risen above that. I'm not
Mm,
racist. I'm not this and I'm not that. But then
exactly.
they show it. Have you ever had an experience like that?
Or someone assumed something
Well,
about.
where someone assumed or presented themselves as like an ally to the BIPOC community, and then their actions demonstrated something differently.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. I feel like that's mostly been experienced for me when I was actually in high school. Like, I don't
Mm,
think I've experienced it really much as adults because people don't really try me up like that. I don't look like the approachable black person
gotcha.
for most people. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think growing up there were assumptions about the experience that I had because I did grow up. I think it was on the reverse side of it because I did grow up having to go to the store with food stamps and all of
Okay.
that stuff because I grew
Okay.
up poor and black. But I was, around a lot of kids that were not. I went to
Hmm.
school primarily with rich white kids because they
Okay.
started busing us to a different part of LaGrange back in the day. And so I
Hmm.
think a lot of the assumption was the reverse was that yeah, we are alike, but I think that they pointed out those differences because I would get picked up from the hood and then they would drive us through the fancy white
Hmm.
neighborhoods to pick up the little white kids. And I remember us chasing the school bus, in these white neighborhoods because they had really long street country club, that type of
Yeah.
vibe.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just me realizing those differences and then them realizing these kids aren't, exactly like us, but
Hmm.
we're all here because we all kind of got integrated into the same school system at the same time. This was like
Oh, gotcha.
1992
Okay.
where I think they probably had not seen a lot of black kids, and I
Hmm.
definitely had not seen a lot of white kids. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was just kind of a reverse experience of that for me.
Got you. Let me ask you this question. When you think about the institution of racism and hearing people say, well, Black people have the same opportunities, or BIPOC people have the same opportunities as white people, they just don't take them. In
Mhm.
your presentation on culture,
Yeah.
how do you talk about understanding that institutional racism?
Yeah. In the presentation, I take us all the way back to, how welfare kind of started to
Mm,
happen within the Black community and how Black men were not allowed in the homes
right.
because, women could not get assistance unless the man was not living there or whatever. So that breakdown of the Black family, just starting with theirs, starting with, things related to us not being able to go to colleges and having to create our own colleges, historically Black colleges and universities for our people to go to in order to be able to get an education, in order to come out of poverty. A lot of the systemic stuff that goes on, I just kind of break down those different facets of what we experienced and what we encountered during those times, and even going into the 80s with the crack epidemic, where we
Mm,
have all of these things that are happening where we had the ability to get money and then
right.
we got put in jail, so that was used again against our community.
Hmm.
So, you know, do Black people have more opportunities now than maybe what they had? Absolutely. But when you look at the bigger picture and you look at the fact that there are so many systems that were put in place to keep Black people
Yeah.
below the white man, and then you
Hmm.
look at how we have evolved, and even in today's society, we still have people in prison for things that are now legal for the
Right.
government and other, entities to do, but we still have people that are incarcerated. So
Hmm.
the whole system was created to keep Black people down, even going back to, at pre-slavery, like
Hmm.
before we were freed, like even going back that far, the systems that were put in place after slavery was to keep the Black person down. So
Right.
we take advantage of certain things, but if you don't have someone in your family, you don't have a mentor to look up to help you navigate how to get out of this situation, you really don't have a chance. And so, like,
Right.
to not acknowledge the privilege of white people and to not acknowledge the fact that, yeah, if your uncle helped you get this job, or you got this job at the firm because you knew somebody that knew someone, and Black
Hmm.
people don't always have those connections. So I mean, a lot of it is we have to do a better job of building community within ourselves and,
Yes.
moving through that. But to just say y'all have the same opportunities, that's cap. That's
Yeah.
BS.
Yeah. Period. Period.
Yes.
One of the things that, some of the younger generation is having to find out about is code switching.
Mm,
Can you
listen.
talk about that?
So code switching is something that I've had to do since probably the second grade, when I first started getting bussed out to Hollis Hand Elementary. And it's just the art of being able to switch from your vernacular that you use when you're at home, when you're with your people, and your professional vernacular that you use when you're in situations. So I started speaking like I was at home, I would not sound like this.
And it's so funny because people will come and say, "Who's that on your voicemail?" It's me.
Right.
It's me. And it's unfortunate that it's ingrained in us
Hmm.
that we have to do that in order to be taken seriously.
Right.
In our counseling sessions, I know for me in my counseling session, it's going to be whatever vernacular comes out.
Right.
That's just the bottom line because I'm going to meet my clients where they are. But I also check myself
Hmm.
when I am working with a white client
Yeah.
and I find myself, sitting more abruptly or, elongating my words and things of that nature. And then I said, stop,
Yeah.
be you, be who you are. But you got to remember, I'm from a generation that taught us that. So
Exactly.
literally, I'm actually taking the clothes off of code switching because if you can't allow my credentials and my ability to
Hmm.
speak for me, we already disconnected.
Right. Yeah.
And, and I see a lot of young people getting frustrated with the thought of code switching. What would you share with them to encourage them to be themselves and understanding that you're going to adjust to whatever environment is that you're in?
Yeah. I think the main thing is just really getting real with yourself, really defining who you are. I think some things are just, I think there's a certain part of it that's just going to be naturally when you with your people, you're going to be a little bit more loose. That's just whatever. When I get off the exit 18, my entire accent changes. So I
It's
get
like you
that.
going to Memphis. That word
Yes,
Maine will pop in.
it is. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like it's like I don't even have to get too far down 85 and I stop saying half of the word and everything just run together or whatever. But I would just say get in touch with the real you,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out who are you. Most people
Mm.
are changing codes or switching codes like in professional settings, but you can be yourself professionally and
Mm-hmm.
still, you know, carry yourself, in a
Right.
way that represents who you are. You don't have to whitewash yourself in order for you
Right.
to be taken seriously. It's about the knowledge that you have, it's about the work that you produce. And so just really looking at yourself, figuring out what parts of myself am I okay? Because there are some
Mm-hmm.
parts, your environment, there's some parts you do got to polish up a little bit. Let's be real, but it ain't just us
Period.
that need the polishing either. So there's that.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I think that in the human race, we've created situations of complexity that are not necessary.
Mhm.
Just be you, be cool with who you are, and
Yeah.
let things, kind of flow. What would you say to individuals who are struggling with the associated anxiety and depression that comes with being Black and
Mhm.
working in various environments?
Yeah. I would say one, honestly, get connected with a therapist that can help you work through some of that. Just because I think that sometimes self-treating things like anxiety and depression can kind of make it worse. And I think it's good to have a strong therapist that can help you ground yourself and
Mm-hmm.
also teach you those tools. I think, things like meditation are really good. Things like really being able to use affirmations to remind yourself of who you are in these spaces and reminding yourself that you don't need anyone there to validate you, that you are already enough. I think that that's a big part of it, but I think to battle some of the mental stuff of it, I do think that there is a need for a strong like CBT based of learning to
Mm-hmm.
reframe your thoughts, remind yourself of those things that are really critical to really be able to talk yourself through it. Because I've
Yeah.
dealt with that,
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace and feeling like, I know that I'm enough, but do you know that I'm enough? And I
Right.
think it's really once you work through that and you have that stronger sense of yourself and you're not battling that imposter syndrome piece of do I deserve to be here?
Mhm.
Am I bamboozling people? Once you get over that piece of it and you really start to own the fact that I went to school for this, I have the degree for this, even if I didn't go to school, if I'm doing a trade or whatever, I know what I'm doing and I don't have to
Right.
prove that to you. And I think the reshaping of the mind in that and validating of yourself, I think that will help people feel a little bit more strong in how they show up, especially dealing with things like microaggression in the workplace, because you know
It's there.
is
It
there.
whew, it's
Yeah.
there. I can't see those microaggressions changing
Hmm.
anytime soon because it's associated with a privileged mindset. So
Exactly.
until that part changes, microaggressions are going to be there. Um, and it's a fight. If you had a message to send to the non-BIPOC community about the importance of understanding cultural competence, what message would that be?
I think first and foremost, it would all go back to check your bias. You may
Mhm,
think that there is none, but there is always a level of bias that we all
mhm,
have. So check that. Don't assume that you know everything about a particular culture. Ask. We're not all, Southerners. We're not all, all Black people are not descendants of slaves. There are people from different ethnicities, whether it's Hispanic,
mhm.
Afro, Cuban, whatever the case. Just ask about the
Right.
the client's worldview, ask about their experiences, and ask about
Mhm.
what it is that they see as the problem in their words. Don't assume, don't easily label things such as depression or anxiety, because there is sometimes sometimes it's things like that's going on, but sometimes things are definitely cultural, and
Mm-hmm.
really dig into learning their story and be curious about their history and what makes them who they are. But the
Yeah.
main thing is just don't assume that know everything. That's the client is going to be the best person to teach you who they
Yeah.
are.
Now, I know that one of your areas of specialty, your clients of specialization, is the LGBTQ community. And
Hmm.
oftentimes they are left out of the conversation of
Hmm.
cultural competence. How important is it for us to be more inclusive in our conversation for the LGBTQ community so that we can break down these barriers? Because not only I see the LGBT community like I see myself as a Black woman.
Hmm.
It's not just one dynamic. I'm a
Right.
woman, I'm Black, I'm educated, whatever. Well, the LGBT community, so you have the LGBTQI community, then you have Black, and you have
Hmm.
white, right? And
Hmm.
they're treated so vastly different. Can you
Yeah.
talk about the importance of cultural competence in the community?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, from a cultural standpoint, it is really important to do a little bit of research on the community. And not necessarily, and I know it's the opposite of what I just said about African American clients, but not necessarily using the therapy to focus on their actual LGBTQIA plus identity, but
Right.
really learning a little bit more about um, just the history of it in your own
Mhm.
time. I know that before I became like a specialist with working with that population, I had to take classes that gave a vast knowledge. So I think increasing your knowledge base,
Mhm.
and also checking your biases, because we, are in a very much, I hate the word, but heteronormative society
Yeah.
where, you may assume pronouns, or you make the
Mhm.
heterosexual assumption that someone is, heterosexual when they come into
Mhm.
therapy. Starting at intake, your forms, making sure that preferred pronouns, things like that are on there, so that the person does not feel like they have to be in a binary box,
Mhm.
from the
Mhm.
beginning, not, husband, wife, spouse, partner, using those
Mhm.
terms that help the person feel seen.
Mhm.
And validated in their experience. So it really is just about opening your mind a little bit more and being inclusive in that way, and referring to them by their preferred pronouns,
Yeah.
even in as simple as documenting your I know some therapists, they may refer to someone as they, them, during their sessions, but then if you go and you document she, her, or him, he in the chart, it's like you're still invalidating that person's experience. So
Right.
just
Right.
doing a little bit of research, checking your bias, and really, letting the client lead the way in terms of talking about certain things around that.
I have a new client, and when she was doing her intake, and I said, "Do you have a preference of pronouns?" She's like, "Oh my God, thank you for asking."
Mm,
I was like, "Okay, I'm assuming too many people don't ask, but
right.
it's intentional, right?"
Yeah.
To me, it's as important as pronouncing my name correctly.
Correct.
That's how important it is to me, because no one should get the right to choose
Hmm.
how to identify me, right? And that's
Exactly.
part of, in my mind, part of cultural competence,
Hmm.
being open and understanding, being very present, for your clients, for yourself, for anyone that you encounter outside
Exactly.
of therapy, because people are going to listen to this podcast that aren't in therapy, that may not even be a therapist. What will
Mm.
we say to them? What can you say to them about being culturally aware for themselves and the importance of that?
Yeah. I think it's always good for us. I think the cultural awareness piece can always be assessed by people that are not clinicians, by looking at your values and really just kind of assessing who you are as a
Mm-hmm.
person, really getting to know, like, why do I do that? What is it? Like, I say, get
Mm-hmm.
clients to get more curious about yourselves. Why do
Yeah.
you get upset when someone criticizes you? Where does that
Mm-hmm.
come from? Like, just
Mm-hmm.
explore. I highly recommend journaling, because journaling is a way to really get yourself in tune with what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important just to kind of dig into who you are
Dig
and
deeper.
be able to explore that with the therapist, because if you know who you are, I think it's going to be easier for you to kind of convey that, and if you don't know who you are just yet,
Get you
I
a therapist.
that
They'll
part.
help you, and that's the thing. I was sharing with someone earlier today about how things are changing, even in the insurance world and all that kind of stuff, where people
Mm,
are about to be stripped off of like Medicaid and things of that nature. And my true concern is those that have been able to get mental health care.
mm,
To me, and it could be my bias, everybody needs a therapist.
mm,
Everybody needs a therapist because your crew, they gonna be your crew, but
right.
they're not going to be able to help you dig deeper,
Mm-hmm.
not in the aspect that you need. They're not really going to be able to help you fully understand what your anxiety and your depression is. When you think about cultural competence, do you think that it's important to have a therapist within your same culture being there for you, or is it's just open to whomever's available?
Well, I don't want to get in no trouble, but I'm gonna say it like this. For Sandtrice Denise Russell, it is very important. And my therapist is very much a Black woman that is not necessarily specifically from my culture, but is definitely, you know, culturally attuned enough with me and my Lagrange history, having self, my all of my trauma, all of my stuff. She is someone that I have been connected to for about 4 years, and she's someone
Okay.
that has definitely helped me dig deeper. So for me, it's absolutely important.
Mhm.
Do I think, you know, Black people would be, BIPOC people would be best served by BIPOC clinicians?
Mhm.
100% true. Is it absolutely necessary for them to be? No, I don't. I think other cultures, if they are willing to do the work, if non-BIPOC counselors are
Yeah.
willing to do the work to become culturally competent, I think that that's totally fine for them to be able to assist us. One, because it's not enough of us to assist everybody, first and
Say
foremost.
that
Like there's only
part.
4.4%, but
Mhm.
I think that they can be served, just not for me personally, that I
Yeah.
couldn't do it. But yeah, I think that, we are very important
Mhm.
in terms of us being able to be culturally competent as well to serve our people. But, you know,
I
best
I
served
agree
by
with
us,
you.
but you can be served by, just get help at the end of the day. If you can't connect with one of us, connect with someone.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. I tell people all the time, listen, it's okay to court your
Hmm.
therapist to see if they're going to be at a space of understanding who you are,
Hmm.
having real and open conversations. If you don't share with a therapist, whether your therapist of the same culture or a different culture, because even though we're both Black, I may not always understand you, and
Hmm.
you may have to listen. I think I'm culturally competent,
Hmm.
except with teenagers,
Oh
because you
yeah.
got some lingo that your girl is trying to learn, trying to really understand, but that's a culture within itself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you have to be in a state of mind and existence to say, I need to learn.
Right.
Ultimately, to me, that's what cultural competence is actually learning. I
Hmm.
remember taking Spanish, and one of the um, professors said, you're not going to get this until you immerse yourself into the culture.
Mm.
And I literally take that in any aspect of understanding different cultures, whether I'm still working on learning Spanish and speaking it
Mm.
fluently or any other aspect. For me, like you, I dug deep into understanding the LGBTQ community. There's still a lot of work that I have to do.
Hmm.
However, my clients are so beautiful in guiding me through
Mm.
process. You always just have to be open. You
Yeah.
know, your workshop. I hope that you are giving your workshop, and I don't know if it is open to non-clinical people, but it needs to be,
Okay.
because people really need to understand the importance of cultural competence. And unfortunately, in our world of clinicians, of the clinical world, most research is done by non-BIPOC
Hmm.
individuals.
Yeah.
So it's very one-sided.
Yeah.
I hope that, yeah, you start opening it up to non-clinical people, because it's so raw, it's
Yeah.
so informative, but it's embracing. And
Mm.
then you have a wealth of knowledge that you will freely share. You don't get ruffled by people trying to come in and ask questions to try to challenge your knowledge. Your
Mm.
professionalism, your decorum, I think, needs to be on a bigger stage. That's just my honest opinion. And I
Okay.
hope that that's a goal of yours. TED Talk it, baby. TED Talk it. That's that's what I'm saying. Let's get it out there. What would be your last words to the audience today? And then tell them how they can find you.
Gotcha. Uh, my last words to the audience actually would just be a motto that I learned being a part of the Black Student Alliance at the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, and that is know thyself, be thyself, and express thyself. Be you in all situations and continue to love on yourself. For clinicians listening, learn more about culture, different cultures outside of your own culture, dig deep, check that bias, and just really, really, spread love, give love, all of that good stuff.
Mhm.
As far as reaching me, I can be reached on all social media platforms under the handle Treaty LPC. And for any type of counseling or business kind of inquiries, you can reach out via email to srussell@uniquedestiny.org.
Awesome. Sandtrice, it was truly, truly, truly a pleasure having you today. I know our shifts are different, so I hope that you can get some rest, and or maybe be off today, because I know you probably just got off this morning. Thank
Mhm.
you for giving us an opportunity to share your wisdom and your knowledge on cultural competence. Keep inspiring the world. Keep being your absolute great self. And
Thank
we've
you.
enjoyed you at Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. Take good
Uh,
care.
all right, thank you.